The sun hadn't yet broken through the darkness when Lieutenant Colonel Simon Trevor gripped his M1 Garand rifle, his eyes fixed on the shadowy jungle tree line ahead. Around him on the northern slope of Hill 170 in Kangar, Burma, 24 men held their positions, each one carrying the same American semi-automatic weapon. 2 years earlier, these rifles had arrived with them from North Africa, a firearm so unfamiliar that 98% of British soldiers had never even held one. In 90 minutes, 300 Japanese soldiers would surge toward them in a desperate attack. The odds would be overwhelming, more than 12 to 1 against Trevor's small force. But he didn't know that yet. What he did know, what every single man under his command understood with bone-deep certainty, was that their American rifles represented something revolutionary. These weapons could mean the difference between walking away from this day or not walking away at all. A metallic click cut through the morning mist as a bolt slid back. But this wasn't the familiar sound of a Lee Enfield, the rifle carried by the vast majority of British infantry throughout the war. This was something different. Smoother, faster, deadlier in the hands of a trained shooter. An M1 Garand could fire 24 aimed rounds in 60 seconds. The British Lee Enfield, despite being the fastest bolt-action rifle ever manufactured, could only manage 15 rounds in that same minute, even under perfect conditions. The numbers painted a clear picture. A single American rifleman with a Garand possessed the sustained firepower of nearly 2 British soldiers armed with Enfields. 3 British soldiers, firing their bolt-action rifles as rapidly as humanly possible, could barely match what one American delivered with mechanical consistency. This gap in firepower would soon become one of the war's most decisive tactical advantages, measured not in specifications, but in lives, saved or lost, and in which side claimed victory. Yet the story of how America came to field the only standard-issue semi-automatic rifle among all the major powers didn't begin on any battlefield. It began in a workshop with a Canadian immigrant who would fundamentally reshape how wars were fought. January 1st, 1888. A small farm 17 miles south of Montreal, in Saint-Rémy, Quebec. Jean Cantius Garand, as he was known then, was born into a world far removed from battlefields and military innovation. Nothing in his childhood suggested that one day he would create a weapon that General George Patton himself would declare the greatest battle implement ever conceived. At 11 years old, young Gene's family uprooted themselves when his father abandoned the farm for work in Connecticut textile mills. By 12, the boy was sweeping floors in a mill in Jewett City, surrounded by machines and mechanical systems. But Gene wasn't just passing time. During his breaks, his eyes followed the mechanical looms, the steam engines, the intricate gears that transformed raw cotton into finished cloth. The precision of those machines fascinated him. By 18, he was working as a machinist himself, and his natural gift became immediately obvious. He possessed an intuitive understanding of how things worked, and he pursued tool and gauge making with a passion that combined mathematical rigor with creative problem-solving. At night, he taught himself engineering through correspondence courses, absorbing principles that most men only learned in formal university classrooms. By 28 years old in 1916, Garand decided to direct his talents toward firearms design. 2 years later, he submitted plans for a semi-automatic rifle to the United States Navy. The Navy took notice. They were impressed enough to invite him to continue his work at the Bureau of Standards in Washington. After 18 months, Springfield Armory in Massachusetts extended an offer, a position as a design engineer. What Garand discovered at Springfield disturbed him. This legendary facility, the same armory whose name had become synonymous with American rifles throughout World War I, had fallen into obsolescence. During the Great War, Springfield had manufactured only 265,000 rifles. That number fell catastrophically short for an army that swelled from 200,000 soldiers to 4 million. Another 47,000 came from Rock Island Arsenal. The shortage forced America to equip hundreds of thousands of troops with British Enfield rifles produced under license by Remington and Winchester. The Springfield Model 1903 was admirable in many respects, accurate, dependable, but it had been designed for peacetime production, hand-fitted carefully by skilled armorers working at an unhurried pace. Modern warfare demanded something different. It demanded weapons that could be produced rapidly by workers with minimal training, using industrial machine tools. Garand grasped a fundamental truth. The next conflict would belong to whichever nation could arm its soldiers fastest with the most capable weapons. The rifle he envisioned would fire with each trigger pull without requiring the soldier to manually cycle a bolt between shots. This semi-automatic operation would triple the firing rate compared to bolt-action designs. Soldiers could maintain their aim between rounds, keep their position steady, and most importantly, this design would tilt the balance of firepower decisively toward offense. Getting there proved anything but straightforward. His initial attempts relied on primer actuation, where the explosion of the primer itself would cycle the action. The system proved unreliable. He pivoted instead to gas operation, channeling propellant gases from the fired cartridge to operate the mechanism. In 1929, his design passed Army acceptance trials. Success seemed assured. Then politics intervened. General Douglas MacArthur, serving as Army Chief of Staff, demanded that the rifle fire the existing .30-06 Springfield cartridge rather than the newer 276 Peterson round for which Garand had originally designed the weapon. MacArthur's justification was purely financial. The Army possessed millions of rounds of .30-06 ammunition in storage. Transitioning to a new cartridge would cost millions of dollars and postpone deployment by years. Garand returned to his workbench and redesigned the entire rifle from the ground up for the heavier, more powerful .30-06 cartridge. The redesign consumed 3 years of work. On August 3, 1933, his new rifle received its official designation, United States Rifle, Caliber .30 M1. On January 9, 1936, the Army formally adopted it as their standard infantry weapon. The first production M1 Garand underwent proof firing, function testing, and accuracy evaluation on July 21, 1937. Manufacturing commenced that September, beginning at a modest 10 rifles daily. By January 1940, Springfield Armory had increased output to 100 per day. Yet this remained insufficient as Europe descended into darkness. On September 20, 1939, the very month Germany invaded Poland, Winchester Repeating Arms received a contract to manufacture M1 Garands. The company approached the project with considerable reluctance. Winchester engineers believed the Garand was too intricate, too expensive for efficient production. Tension between Winchester personnel and Springfield Armory staff became openly antagonistic, each side questioning the other's competence. Despite the acrimony, both manufacturers accelerated production as war clouds darkened. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, American factories were already producing rifles at unprecedented volume. The M1 Garand became an urgent priority overnight. By January 1942, Springfield Armory was producing over 1,000 rifles daily. Production reached its peak in January 1944, when Springfield alone manufactured 122,000 rifles in a single month, 3,936 rifles per day, or 164 rifles per hour. Winchester added another 513,000 rifles between December 1940 and June 1945. When the war ended in August 1945, more than 4 million M1 Garands had rolled off production lines. America stood alone among the major powers. The United States fielded a semi-automatic rifle as standard infantry equipment for every soldier. Every other major army, British, German, Soviet, Japanese, Italian, relied primarily on bolt-action designs. The tactical consequences of this distinction were profound and would reshape combat throughout the war. A soldier armed with a bolt-action rifle must complete numerous discrete actions between each shot. Pull the bolt handle upward and rearward, ejecting the spent cartridge. Press the bolt forward, loading a fresh round. Lock the bolt down into battery. Raise the rifle back into firing position, reacquire the target, aim carefully, and squeeze the trigger. For a trained soldier, this entire sequence consumed 4 to 6 seconds, and that time stretched during the stress and chaos of actual combat. The M1 Garand eliminated most of these steps. Finger pulls trigger, rifle fires. Expanding gas from the burning propellant automatically operates the mechanism. The bolt retracts, the empty casing ejects, a new cartridge feeds into the chamber, the bolt locks forward, all in roughly 1/5 of a second. The shooter's hands remain steady, the sight picture stays perfectly aligned, the aim never wavers. Trigger pulls again, another round departs the muzzle. The firing rate advantage was dramatic, though its significance wasn't immediately obvious when examining single shots. A Garand and a bolt-action rifle took essentially identical time to fire one round each. The disparity became evident when firing multiple shots in succession. An M1 Garand could deliver 8 aimed shots within 20 seconds. A Lee Enfield required 48 to 50 seconds for the identical number of rounds. A German Kar 98K needed almost a full minute. In the confusion and violence of actual combat, this advantage translated into overwhelming superiority. American infantry could pour 3 times as many rounds downrange as their enemies during any firefight. They could maintain suppressive fire more effectively. They could disrupt enemy counterattacks before they gained momentum. They could dominate engagements through the sheer volume of accurate fire they could deliver. Yet the M1 Garand possessed genuine limitations. The 8-round N-block clip system generated criticism from the moment of adoption. Unlike bolt-action designs, the rifle couldn't be conveniently topped off mid-magazine. Soldiers faced a choice: fire all 8 rounds, or manually eject a partially loaded clip, wasting precious ammunition. The distinctive metallic ping emitted when an empty clip ejected became legendary, though whether enemy combatants could actually hear it amid the cacophony of battle remains disputed. The weapon also carried considerably more weight than most bolt-action rifles. Fully loaded with sling and bayonet attached, an M1 Garand weighed roughly 11 pounds. A British Lee Enfield tipped the scales at 8.7 pounds. Across a 20-mile march, that additional 2.5 pounds accumulated into genuine exhaustion. These shortcomings, however, paled against the weapon's considerable advantages. The Garand boasted rugged construction, capable of functioning reliably in conditions that disabled more delicate designs. It maintained accuracy to 500 yards. The powerful 30-06 cartridge delivered substantial stopping power with every hit. Most significantly, it distributed devastating firepower among every infantryman, not merely specialized marksmen or officers. The British Army had examined the M1 Garand in 1939 as a potential replacement for their Lee Enfield No. 1 Mark III. By January 1940, Birmingham Small Arms Company had already commenced preparations to manufacture the Lee Enfield No. 4. British military planners opted against adopting the Garand. They cited manufacturing capacity as the official reason. Production lines were already committed to existing weapons, and switching would create delays Britain couldn't endure with German invasion imminent. Unspoken considerations influenced the decision as well. The Garand carried a unit cost of roughly $85 in 1943, equivalent to nearly $1,400 in modern currency. That represented almost double the expense of a bolt-action rifle. For a nation already financially stretched, the cost appeared prohibitive. Britain also confronted ammunition complications. The 30-06 Springfield cartridge proved incompatible with the 303 British round. Adopting the Garand would demand either producing entirely new ammunition or modifying the rifle's design, both expensive undertakings. Consequently, the British Army persisted with the Lee Enfield, a weapon representing the zenith of bolt-action rifle engineering. The Lee Enfield held 10 rounds in its magazine compared to 5 in most competing bolt-actions. Soldiers could load it rapidly using 5-round stripper clips. Most impressively, it featured the smoothest, fastest bolt-action ever manufactured. The secret resided in the Lee bolt's rear-mounted locking lugs and abbreviated bolt throw. Unlike Mauser pattern actions that locked at the bolt's front, demanding an extensive handle throw that disrupted the shooter's sight picture, the Lee Enfield's bolt traveled straight rearward just a few inches. Experienced riflemen could operate it while maintaining their rifle against their shoulder. British Army training protocols required every soldier to master the Mad Minute drill. Beginning with 1 round already chambered and 4 more in the magazine, a rifleman possessed 60 seconds to fire at a target at 300 yards. specifically a second-class figure target measuring 4 feet square with a 12-inch silhouette positioned at its center. Soldiers carrying a Lee Enfield had to work the bolt manually, loading fresh rounds from ammunition pouches rather than relying on preloaded magazines. The baseline requirement was straightforward: 15 hits on target. Getting 15 accurate shots downrange in a single minute represented solid shooting, yet many of the king's soldiers routinely pushed far beyond this threshold. Skilled riflemen regularly put 20 to 30 rounds on target. The truly exceptional ones surpassed 35. In 1908, Sergeant Major Jesse Wallingford achieved a documented record of 36 hits during a single minute of fire. Sergeant Instructor Frank Snoxall reportedly managed 38 hits around 1914, though historians continue to debate whether this actually occurred. These kinds of results were nothing short of extraordinary. Achieving them demanded countless hours spent perfecting technique, meticulous ammunition handling, and steely composure when the stakes mattered most. The British military in 1914 stood as perhaps the world's finest fighting force, built on long-serving volunteers who spent endless hours honing their shooting skills. When German forces encountered British troops at Mons that August, they became convinced they faced machine gun fire when they were actually taking hits from Lee Enfield rifles operated by professional marksmen. Yet even these remarkable feats with the world's quickest bolt-action weapon barely matched what an ordinary American infantryman could accomplish with an M1 Garand. The M1 Garand's official aimed rate of fire came to 24 rounds per minute. Reality often exceeded specifications. Trained operators regularly managed 40 to 50 accurate shots per minute when engaging targets under 300 yards away. The numbers told a compelling story. 3 British soldiers with Lee Enfields, each squeezing off 15 aimed shots per minute, combined for 45 rounds downrange every minute. A single American with an M1 Garand produced 40 rounds per minute working alone. 3 Lee Enfields against 1 Garand made for nearly comparable odds, though the American shooter possessed other tactical advantages. The Garand operator never shifted from his firing position. His aim stayed locked on target. He could track moving targets while maintaining continuous fire. The bolt-action rifleman, regardless of skill level, suffered through repeated interruptions in his sight picture after each shot. He had to haul the bolt backward and forward. He had to relocate his aim after each round. Milliseconds kept adding up to dangerous disadvantages during actual combat. When American forces first received complete shipments of M1 Garand rifles, they arrived in the Pacific Theater during late 1941. Units stationed in the Philippines obtained their new rifles between August and November of that year. When Japan attacked on December 8th, certain American and Filipino formations carried Garand rifles, though the majority remained equipped with Springfield bolt-action models. Early battle reports presented a complicated picture. Several units received 5-round stripper clips designed for older Springfield rifles instead of the proper 8-round Garand clips. Misunderstanding maintenance procedures resulted in weapon failures in the oppressive tropical heat and moisture. Men grumbled about how heavy the rifle felt during exhausting jungle movements. Yet those who operated the Garand properly saw its advantages immediately. During engagements, American forces armed with these rifles could pin down Japanese attackers even when substantially outnumbered. The sheer amount of incoming fire made crossing open terrain an invitation to death. Japanese infantry carrying bolt-action Arisaka rifles found themselves consistently overpowered by American firepower. As factories ramped up production through 1942 and 1943, additional units received Garand rifles. By 1944, virtually all American infantry divisions carried M1 rifles as their primary weapon. The rifle appeared everywhere, across the Pacific Islands, through Europe during winter conditions, across the scorching North African landscape. German military leadership recognized the threat. Papers captured in 1943 show Wehrmacht commanders specifically warning about superior American firepower. German troops reported that American rifle squads delivered more fire than equivalent German squads despite deploying fewer automatic weapons. The Garand semi-automatic capability equipped every American rifleman with abilities that Germans reserved for specialists operating rare semi-automatic G43 rifles. Operation Torch began in November 1942 when American and British forces landed in North Africa. Among the assault formations were British commandos equipped with American weapons for joint operations. Number 1 Commando and Number 6 Commando received full sets of American arms: M1 Garand rifles, Thompson submachine guns, and Browning automatic rifles. Throughout the entire war, these commandos retained these weapons. They favored them over standard British infantry weapons. The firepower and durability combination proved superior during actual combat. When Number 1 Commando moved to Burma in late 1944 as part of 3rd Commando Brigade, they carried their American rifles with them. For weeks, the commandos fought through the Arakan Peninsula, conducting amphibious assaults meant to block Japanese escape routes. They captured Hill 170 near Kangoi, a commanding height that overlooked the principal highway leading to Rangoon. Maintaining control of this position mattered enormously. If British forces lost it, the entire peninsula operation would collapse. The Japanese 54th Division understood the danger. Early on January 31st, the 2nd Battalion of the 154th Infantry Regiment launched a tremendous counterattack. Artillery and machine gun barrages hammered the northern sector of Hill 170, where Lieutenant George Nolan's No. 4 Troop maintained their defensive line. Starting at 0730, Japanese riflemen attacked in successive platoon formations, lobbing grenades and charging with bayonets fixed. Nolan's 24 soldiers faced approximately 300 attackers. The situation looked desperate, yet every British commando carried an M1 Garand. The advantage became obvious. Japanese troops armed with bolt-action Type 99 rifles lacked the capacity to match sustained fire from the commando's semi-automatic weapons. Each British soldier maintained continuous fire without the exposed moments required for operating a bolt manually. Attacking forces were mowed down before reaching grenade-throwing distance. Later, Lieutenant Colonel Trevor, who commanded No. 1 Commando, recorded in his personal writings that the unit's combination of Garand rifles, Thompson guns, and Bren light machine guns produced a decisive firepower superiority against the Japanese defenders. The Garands proved exceptionally valuable because they supplied automatic weapon firepower for each rifleman without consuming ammunition at the rate true machine guns required. The battle lasted through the entire day. Japanese soldiers pressed forward in successive waves against British positions. Lieutenant Nolan moved constantly along the line, passing ammunition to his men, operating machine guns when crew members were hit, and firing his own Garand until a Japanese bullet found him. His personal bravery and the superior firepower his platoon possessed held the line despite overwhelming numerical disadvantage. As darkness fell and attacks finally ceased, more than 450 Japanese soldiers lay dead across the hillside. British losses mounted but remained manageable. No. 4 Troop had successfully held their ground. The firepower advantage had determined the outcome. For his heroic conduct, Lieutenant Nolan was awarded a Victoria Cross following his death. The commando defense of Hill 170 entered military history as a textbook example of how superior weapon technology could overcome numerical disadvantage. Hill 170 illustrated what American infantry experienced across all war theaters. The M1 Garand provided infantry soldiers with a fundamental combat advantage. They could dominate firefights through sheer volume of accurate fire. They could halt enemy assaults before they developed momentum. They could defend positions against stronger attacking forces. General George Patton, commanding Third Army in Europe during 1944 and 1945, sent a message to the Ordnance Department dated January 26, 1945. In my opinion, the M1 rifle is the greatest battle implement ever devised. Coming from a notoriously demanding commander who seldom offered praise, this represented genuine recognition of the weapon's capability. Patton grasped what the Garand meant for combat operations. His army could attack boldly because infantry could dependably win firefights. When German forces mounted counterattacks, American defensive volleys destroyed them. The semi-automatic rifle elevated American infantry from adequate to genuinely formidable. The manufacturing achievement matched the weapon's combat performance. Between 1937 and 1945, Springfield Armory produced 3,526,922 M1 Garands. Winchester manufactured an additional 513,880, bringing combined output above 4 million rifles by the war's conclusion. Factories operated continuously around the clock in 3 shifts. By mid-1943, Springfield alone cranked out 4,000 rifles daily. This accomplishment happened despite critical labor shortages, as women and older men filled positions left vacant by drafted workers. Each rifle had to pass rigorous quality checks. Acceptance testing demanded that every weapon group within 4 inches at 100 yards. Supplying 4 million rifles presented staggering logistical challenges. A single Garand contained 54 major components alongside hundreds of smaller pieces. Every component required exact specifications. Barrels underwent careful examination for straightness and bore accuracy. Gas operating systems faced high-pressure testing. Receivers endured stress tests to confirm they would not split apart during sustained firing. The supply network sprawled across the entire nation. Steel rolled from mills in Pennsylvania and Ohio. Wooden furniture came from walnut trees harvested in California, Missouri, and throughout the Appalachian region. Connecticut and Massachusetts produced machine tools. Springs came from specialized manufacturers in Indiana. The network of suppliers involved tens of thousands of people who never touched a finished rifle but supplied irreplaceable components. This monumental industrial mobilization represented America's core strategic advantage. The nation's manufacturing infrastructure, sheltered by distance from enemy air attacks, could build weapons faster than enemies could destroy them. While Germany struggled equipping every soldier with adequate rifles, America issued the world's most sophisticated infantry rifle as standard equipment. The expense was significant yet affordable. In 1943, each rifle cost $85, roughly $1,400 in current money. 4 million rifles required $340 million. Even this substantial sum represented merely a fraction of America's total wartime spending of $300 billion. The increased combat effectiveness repaid this investment many times over. Following the war's conclusion, M1 Garand stayed in service for additional years. When North Korea invaded across the border in June 1950, Springfield Armory restarted rifle manufacturing. 2 more contractors, International Harvester and Harrington and Richardson, produced Garands during the Korean conflict. Production running from 1952 through 1957 added roughly 1.4 million additional rifles. The Garand saw action in Korea, opposing Chinese and North Korean troops, carrying Soviet equipment. Chinese soldiers frequently wielded PPS submachine guns, compact weapons delivering impressive rates of fire over short distances. However, the Garand's greater accuracy at medium ranges and its more powerful cartridge provided American forces a crucial edge. Research following the Korean War showed most infantry firefights happened within 300 yards, where the Garand performed optimally. The year 1957 brought official adoption of the M14 rifle. The M14 represented an advanced version of the Garand, featuring selective fire and a 20-round detachable magazine. Manufacturing started in 1959, and the new rifle progressively replaced the M1 through the early 60s. By 1965, the M1 had been completely retired from active service. It retained John Garand's gas-operated mechanism and rotating bolt design. When the M14 subsequently gave way to the M16 during the 60s, Garand's core design concepts persisted in American military rifles. Around 13 nations bought or accepted American surplus Garands, demonstrating its worldwide value. South Korea, West Germany, Italy, Japan, Denmark, Greece, Turkey, Iran, and numerous others outfitted their militaries with these rifles throughout the 1950s and 60s. Some continued operating into the 1980s. The rifle's extended service life reflected its tough construction and practical design. British troops who carried the Garand in combat overwhelmingly favored it over their Lee Enfield rifles. Commandos who carried American weapons in North Africa and Burma kept them long after peacetime returned. During veteran gatherings, former soldiers reminisced about how the Garand's firepower protected their lives. The weapon supplied confidence during firefights that bolt-action rifles simply could not match. The real story behind these two rifles reveals something profound about how nations wage war. The Lee-Enfield represented Britain's approach: take an existing technology and perfect it beyond measure. Fast handling, incredibly smooth action, built to last, utterly dependable. This was bolt-action rifle engineering at its absolute peak, the culmination of everything the 19th century had learned. For what it was designed to do, it came remarkably close to perfection. But America took a completely different path. John Garand didn't set out to make a better bolt-action rifle. He set out to make bolt-action rifles disappear entirely. His creation embodied a wholly different mindset. Why force a soldier to perform the same physical motions over and over when the rifle itself could handle that burden? Why demand that human hands cycle the bolt when the weapon's own systems could do the work? The semi-automatic mechanism shifted that workload from the soldier's arms and coordination to the rifle's mechanical systems. This philosophical divide extended far beyond firearms. It shaped how America approached combat itself. While European military powers built their strength on rigorous training and centuries of tradition, America pursued a different strategy. Where the old powers sought to make each individual soldier more lethal through endless drilling and superior skills, America pursued multiplication through equipment instead. Better machinery meant average soldiers could achieve what previously required extraordinary training. The Garand embodied this perfectly. A soldier with average marksmanship skills and a Garand could outperform an exceptionally trained rifleman carrying a Lee-Enfield. The rifle's semi-automatic nature compensated for differences in operator ability. A mediocre shot with a Garand beat an expert shot with a bolt-action weapon. The machine trumped human skill. This wasn't meant as disrespect toward British marksmanship, which remained exceptional throughout World War II. Yet marksmanship alone couldn't bridge one fundamental gulf: the difference between firing 8 rounds without touching the bolt versus manually working that bolt between every shot. The mechanics were unforgiving. Consider the brutal arithmetic of a 60-second firefight. 3 British soldiers with Lee-Enfields, each capable of delivering 15 aimed rounds per minute at maximum sustainable rate, produced 45 rounds combined. 1 American with an M1 Garand firing at 24 aimed rounds per minute, well below what the weapon could achieve, produced 40 rounds. 3 bolt-action rifles, 1 semi-automatic weapon, almost tied. Yet this comparison didn't capture the full advantage. The 3 British positions meant 3 separate targets for enemy fire. 3 sets of supplies needed, 3 soldiers consuming resources. The single American soldier achieved nearly identical firepower while consuming just 1/3 the personnel costs. Tactically, the difference was revolutionary. An American squad of 12 men carrying 11 Garands and 1 Browning automatic rifle threw more sustained fire than a British section of 10 men with 9 Lee-Enfields and 1 Bren gun. The Americans had 2 extra soldiers, yet their firepower advantage exceeded what 2 additional bolt-action riflemen could contribute. Squad tactics transformed entirely. American doctrine centered on aggressive maneuvering under fire. One group would hammer the enemy with continuous rounds, while another swept around the flank. The Garand made this possible because soldiers maintained suppressing fire without constant pauses for reloading. Defenders couldn't effectively shoot back while Americans advanced. British tactics demanded something different. Soldiers staggered their reloading deliberately, trying to ensure someone always had a round ready to fire. Training helped, but it couldn't eliminate the reality. Moments existed when multiple soldiers worked bolts simultaneously and fire volume dropped dangerously. Germany faced identical constraints with the Kar-98K. German squad tactics centered on the MG-34 or MG-42 machine gun, doing the heavy firing, with riflemen playing supporting roles. This defensive approach worked, but offensive operations faced limitations. American squads could push forward with every rifleman contributing real firepower. The Soviet Union produced millions of semi-automatic rifles, including the SVT-40 and SKS. Yet these weapons never matched the Garand's reliability or production numbers. Soviet units mixed semi-automatic and bolt-action rifles throughout the war, never achieving the standardized equipment that American forces enjoyed. Japan tried developing semi-automatic rifles but never got beyond experimental models. Japanese manufacturing couldn't achieve the precision tolerances required and lacked resources for such complex weapons at massive scale. Japanese infantrymen faced American firepower equipped with Arisaka rifles holding just 5 rounds. The combat disparity was staggering. The Garand's influence extended far beyond that conflict. The operating system Garand perfected, a gas-operated semi-automatic mechanism with a rotating bolt, became the blueprint for military rifles globally. Soviet AK-47s, American M16s, British SA-80s, and countless other designs built upon Garand's system. Modern military rifles fire fully automatic, yet actual combat shooting relies almost entirely on semi-automatic fire for accuracy. That fundamental principle, allowing the weapon itself to perform the cycling action rather than requiring manual manipulation, traces directly back to Garand's work decades earlier. He changed infantry combat more profoundly than perhaps any other weapons designer in the 20th century. Yet John Garand himself never saw financial reward for his genius. As a government employee earning $3,500 annually, he declined to patent his invention separately, letting the government own it completely. After World War II, Congress proposed granting him $100,000, but the legislation didn't pass. He received various medals and recognition, but nothing matching his actual contribution. When he retired from Springfield Armory in 1953, at age 65, he'd spent 34 years developing and refining his rifle. He passed away quietly in 1974 at 86. By then, over 5 million M1 Garands had rolled off production lines. His weapon had armed American forces through 3 wars. His design principles shaped every modern military rifle. Britain's choice to stick with the Lee Enfield tells a different story about different circumstances. In 1940, Britain faced genuine invasion threat. Every factory, every worker, every pound had to serve immediate survival needs. Switching rifles would have halted production for critical months at the worst possible time. Britain also carried global responsibilities America didn't. The British Empire stretched across a quarter of Earth's land. Troops scattered across Africa, Asia, the Middle East, the Pacific. Introducing a new rifle meant replacing weapons on every continent. The logistical challenge was enormous. Additionally, British industrial capacity didn't match America's. German bombing raids, the relentless Blitz, destroyed factories, killed workers, disrupted supply lines. Shifting to a more complex, expensive rifle design would have pushed already strained manufacturing to breaking point. Britain stayed with what worked and achieved remarkable results through superior training and innovative tactics. British soldiers mastered their weapons completely. The famous Mad Minute training created handling skills that partially offset the technological gap. America faced no such constraints. Vast oceans provided protection. American factories operated at full capacity without bombing threats. The nation's enormous industrial base could absorb producing complex weapons. America could arm every infantryman with semi-automatic rifles, because American industry could manufacture anything it chose. This strategic difference explained technological advantages across many systems, not just firearms. American forces had more trucks, more radios, more artillery, more aircraft, more of everything. American industry produced in abundance what other nations produced with difficulty. The Garand represented just one example of how manufacturing capacity converted into military power. The rifle's legacy persists in museums, private collections, and shooting ranges more than 8 decades after introduction. M1 Garands remain treasured by civilian shooters for their accuracy, dependability, and historical resonance. Federal programs have sold hundreds of thousands of surplus weapons to American citizens. Collectors prize them as historical artifacts. A rifle presented to Senator John F. Kennedy sold for $149,500 in 2015. Garand's own personal rifle, serial number 1 million, brought $287,500 in 2018. Wartime examples in good condition command substantial prices, testifying to their cultural importance. The M1 Garand story ultimately encapsulates the triumph of innovation over tradition. The Lee Enfield represented the pinnacle of bolt-action refinement, decades of incremental improvement approaching perfection. Yet perfecting existing technology couldn't challenge creating entirely new technology. The semi-automatic action wasn't just incrementally superior, it was fundamentally different, reshaping how infantry combat functioned. Garand understood this. He recognized soldiers needed weapons working alongside them, not weapons demanding constant skill to operate effectively. His rifle handled the mechanical work of cycling rounds, letting soldiers concentrate on aim and trigger control. This seemingly modest innovation multiplied combat effectiveness dramatically. The mathematics stayed unforgiving. 3 British riflemen with Lee Enfields firing at trained rates of 15 aimed rounds per minute combined for 45 rounds. 1 American with a Garand at a conservative 24 aimed rounds per minute produced 24 rounds. Yet that American maintained his position, never broke sight picture, needed no time working a bolt. His fire stayed consistent, more accurate, more sustainable. Practically speaking, he functioned like 2 bolt-action soldiers. Not quite 3 to 1, but closer than any World War II weapons comparison. The Garand delivered firepower advantages measured in multiples, not small percentages. That converted directly to tactical victories. American infantry advanced under fire because they suppressed defenders effectively. They held positions with fewer soldiers because each contributed more firepower. They broke up attacks through overwhelming volume. They prevailed through technology when they lacked superior numbers. General Patton was right. The M1 Garand represented the greatest battle implement ever created, not through perfection, but through possibility. It demonstrated that technology could multiply effectiveness more than training alone ever could. It showed innovation beats refinement. It proved the future belongs to those creating new solutions rather than perfecting old ones. The Lee Enfield remained an excellent rifle throughout its service. British soldiers wielded it effectively through World War II, Korea, into the 1950s. Reliable, accurate, fast for its type. Yet it was still bolt action. No training closed the gap between manual bolt operation and self-cycling mechanisms. Garand's design pointed toward infantry weapons' future. Semi-automatic operation became standard. Within decades, fully automatic rifles emerged commonly. Bolt-action military rifles faced extinction, and Garand's system accelerated that transition. These 2 rifles embody American 20th century warfare philosophy. Britain maximized force effectiveness through professional soldiers, intensive training, and established tradition. America multiplied average soldier capabilities through superior technology, industrial power, and constant innovation. Both approaches held merit, but in World War II, American manufacturing and technological edge proved decisive. 3 British soldiers with Lee Enfields couldn't quite equal what 1 American with a Garand delivered. That single statement captures why the M1 Garand revolutionized infantry combat forever. Not because British soldiers proved inferior, they ranked among the world's finest. Not because the Lee Enfield suffered from poor design. It represented bolt-action perfection. Rather, semi-automatic operation possessed undeniable superiority. The machines had spoken, the future had arrived, and it carried an M1 Garand.